Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge or, in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people.
Which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello, and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast. We're in the month of December now, and I am focusing on the area of support during this month. And it's with great intention that I've chosen to focus on this during the month of December. A lot of us are anticipating some extended time off with our children during the holiday break. And for some of us, this is not completely welcome. We don't have that glee that some might, that their children are out of school, because what that means is we're out of the structures that really support us with our children. So I want you to listen to this episode. It's early in December, so I believe that you have sufficient time to really evaluate and decide what you might create during this season. It's not too late. Since it is in the theme of support, I'll mention the Unchallenge. And I want to say we're having such a great time in the community huddle sessions that we're doing. I'm absolutely loving it. I'm taking it on myself as well. So I'm doing it along with everybody, and it's been so meaningful and impactful to me. And if you have a desire, you haven't joined yet, come over. It's amazing. You can just find a link in the show notes. Okay, let's look first at reasons you might not ask for help. The first one, the one that I hear the most, is but they don't know how to care for my child. And you're right. They don't, because they never learned. And you haven't trained them yet. I want you to consider this. I think for so many moms, you look at what you do and it is inconceivable for you to think somebody else can do it. But what you have forgotten is that there was a point in which you couldn't do it. You didn't know how. You had never done it before. And you learned, right? And I want to offer some compassion here that our children feel so vulnerable to us sometimes, that handing off the care of them can feel really, really vulnerable. And so I just want to acknowledge that and say that that's normal. It's okay. And it doesn't mean that you have to stop. There's many things that we do that are vulnerable that we would do over and over again when we examine them. Another reason is you might feel like it's too much to ask. The thing I want to offer you in this area is that it's not your decision to make on what is too much or too little to ask. When you ask something of somebody, they have the ability to say yes or no. What just popped into my head is that when my good friend and the editor of this podcast had cancer, she asked for help. She would text or call and say, hey, can you give me a ride to chemo? And there were some times where I said, no, I can't. I might have had work meeting I couldn't change. And if she had come back and saying, I absolutely have no other choice, I probably would have canceled that meeting, but that wasn't the case. When I said no, she asked somebody else, or we asked my husband to help as well. But it wasn't her decision to make on whether it was too much to ask. It was mine. After she asked, it was out of her control. So that's just a very tangible example that popped into my head. So now the reason we might not ask is they might say no. And when somebody says no to something we want them to say yes to, we often have thoughts and feelings about that. And of course we do. That's the human experience. But I also want to suggest that that's optional, and we can really evaluate how we think and feel about when somebody says no or when somebody doesn't say yes. And that's just part of what we do in coaching. Here's a big one. It's really uncomfortable to receive. This is something I've learned time and time again. And I feel like there's seasons where I get really good at receiving. And then there's seasons where I unpractice it and I kind of lose my skill. An example of this is one of my friends volunteered. So I actually didn't even ask her, but she volunteered to process the paperwork that is required for me to submit my personal therapy to be paid for by my insurance. So I go to a provider that's outside of the covered plan. So therefore we have to do a reimbursement for it. And she does this every month for me and my son. And it's such a gift. Oh my gosh, it's such a gift. And it's really uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to receive this from her and not give anything to her. And yet I choose to do that every month. I choose to send her the invoices every month, trusting that she'll say when she's done. And so this is just a very tangible example I want you to look at too, that it's okay if it's uncomfortable. That doesn't mean you shouldn't accept or ask. Something I also want to mention about the discomfort, and there is an episode I have a while back, I have to look at the number, I'll put it in the show notes, about receiving. So if you really want to dive into this, you certainly can. We're tribal beings. And what that means is that we rely on one another for our well-being. And especially in early times when we didn't have all the modern conveniences that we do now, we relied on each person of the tribe to contribute in some way. And if they didn't, we might decide we don't want them in our tribe anymore. They might get kicked out. And so over so many years, we've developed this need to contribute because that's just what we saw other people doing. And I want to acknowledge that this is our default setting, but we have the opportunity to manually override that because it just doesn't work anymore like it once did. Okay. Number 5 reason of why we don't ask for help. We don't even think of it. I think this is like one of the most obvious, but obviously not obvious ones. When we are so in our stuff, I don't even think it crosses our minds on what and how we can ask for help. And this is something that happens often when we are stuck just feeling like a victim of what's happening. We might not say a victim, but we just kind of might feel, we feel trapped or stuck or like no one gets it. And so I think we don't even think of asking. And so obviously, if you don't think of it, you're probably not going to do it. And the last reason I wanted to point out is that there's likely an unquestioned belief that you have, or a series of beliefs, that you should be able to do it on your own, that you shouldn't need to ask for help. That for some reason you look at what other people are doing and compare it to what you're doing and say, like, I should be able to do this. Which I just want to offer that this is something that we can question. Because I think when we question, we would realize, no, friend, there is truly more on my plate than in other situations with other families. And I shouldn't be able to do it on my own. And it's okay to ask for help. So looking at different areas of help, I did a quick brainstorm and I'd be curious to hear what other areas you see. Areas that you might consider would be financial, asking for financial help, meals, all the different parts of meals, meal prep, meal delivery. This might be a specific meal or protocol for your child. Of course, childcare. In this category, I mean, I'm sure I could list all the things. It could be their medical care, the insurance support, doctor's appointments, therapies. I mean, this part is endless. So that genre, house help, right? Whether it's your yard, your property, your home, all of that, lots of areas there. Medication management, for those of you that have medications, we know that's a whole thing in itself. And insurance management, like I mentioned earlier. So that is not an exhaustive list by any means. Now I want to look at consequences for not asking for and accepting help. The first one is the consequences that it will have on your child. I want you to consider that it's actually not kind to have your child have one or maybe two, if your husband's equally caring. It's not kind to have one person that can care for your child. That's robbing them of the gift of having multiple people love them. One of my friends, and actually she's going to be a future guest on this podcast, her child was very dependent on 24/7 care, and she got cancer. She got breast cancer. She got taken out by literally fighting for herself to survive. And so she had to develop a deep team of people that could support her daughter in equal ways that she had been. I want you to consider that it is good for your child to learn to depend on and receive care from other people. Another consequence is that you don't get a break. When you don't get a break, we all know this, that we are not our best selves when we are exhausted or even just like bored, not wanting to do the same thing that we've been doing over and over and over again. So when you've neglected yourself, you have nothing to give. And when you have nothing to give, when people want stuff, it feels very yucky for us. A quick little example is last night I was putting all my kids to bed and I was tired. I wanted to be done. I was like, okay, good night, checking out. And then all the requests kept coming in. I want to be tucked in, complaining about somebody's music, etc., etc. And if I just observe myself, I was just like, the quickest way to get out of this room, I'll say anything. I didn't say this to my kids, obviously. It was like, okay, yeah. We'll do it in the morning. Yeah. Okay, good night. Love you. And it's fine, right? Like this is a little bit different situation. I don't know that, I guess I could have asked my husband for help. I didn't think of it. So there you go. Example number 5 from earlier. But the idea here is that when we're depleted, we don't get to experience the joy of giving ourselves. We get to experience the resentment. And we all know what that feels like. The funny thing here is that the desire that we have to do the best for our child and neglect ourselves by default is actually creating the opposite effect. Because again, look at my example earlier from me being super short, tucking my kids in. By me not asking for help or maybe even drawing a boundary with my kids, I actually created a way of being with my kids that was not the one I want them to have, right? Their mom was just trying to get away from them, basically. So I want to remember back in the episode 116, where I talk about where you are and kind of knowing where you are so you were knowing where you're going in episode 116. And the first stage is when we're like the deer in headlights, everything's new. I call this stunned and surviving. And so this is where actually people volunteer a lot for help. And this is like the season where it becomes a little bit easier, where you have less resistance. But then as we kind of grow up and as things move along, we move into the what I call stabilized yet self-sacrificing stage. And this is when it's like more, we move into the long-term need for support and we kind of learn how to be on our own again. And then moving into stage 3 is when you realize, ooh, this is not sustainable. That you start to have a little bit of pushback because you have this desire rising up in you to have space for you again. That the sole focus on your child and giving into them is shifting from feeling good to actually feeling where you feel resentment and you feel exhaustion and stuck. So in this stage 3 is when you haven't necessarily figured out how to ask for help or what to ask for, but your desire has risen up. And that's why I call this stage the rebellion. I was calling it alone and afraid before, but I renamed it. I like rebellion better. But really, I mean, some of the symptoms of the stage are feeling very alone, like no one gets it, and afraid that it's going to be like this forever. And a big part here is that you can see the fear that it's going to be like this forever comes from how you were being about asking and receiving help. Not solely, but that is a contributing factor. And so this rebellion is actually fighting against the beliefs that you have currently to support you in moving to the next stage. And the next stage is what I call calm the chaos, where you expand what you're comfortable with. You work through these blocks. And as a result, you then create a support team and lots of other things. And you end up not feeling so alone. And you get your life back. So I want to mention here, I think it's important that you know your options, that this is the work that we do over in the Pathway to Peace group coaching program. And this program is currently open. And so if you're in this rebellion stage, or if you're inching closer to it and you're curious, I want you to consider signing up for a consult and step further towards fully embodying that stage 3 and moving into stage 4. And let's move to the final consequence for not asking for help. You deprive those who love you the opportunity to help you and to know you better. This is another one that's really interesting, that we have this belief that no one understands and no one gets us, but we've neglected to realize that we haven't let anybody in. So of course they don't understand us. I want you to consider that if you are not asking for and receiving help from those who love you, you're robbing them. Okay? And I'm saying that with, a smile on my face. But I want you to be thinking in your head right now, I am robbing my family of loving me better. Okay. So I wanted to do a quick brainstorm also on who to ask for help. Some of this might be really obvious. I think the quick obvious ones are family and friends, right? Also kind of expanding that circle, your neighbors, expanding the circle even further. Perhaps you have a church community. Perhaps you have organizations that you can reach out to. So one of the organizations that we have received a ton of financial support from and spiritual support It's called the Mitchell Thorpe Foundation. If you're a local San Diegan, I can connect you. And they are like a lifeline. And I won't go into them in too detail right now, but I want you to consider that there's organizations specifically designed to help you. It's moms like us that have perhaps graduated for one reason or another. They know intimately what you need. Their only desire is to help you. Okay? So other organizations like Regional Center or Challenge Athlete Foundation, they offer financial support for athletes, challenge athletes. And moving even further, you might consider, okay, maybe there's some retired teachers that actually have all the skills and understanding of how to work with a childlike mind. So a retired physical therapist, et cetera, et cetera. And moving a little bit more creatively is, what about the staff that's already trained at your child's school? Perhaps they want a side job. You might have to check with the legal requirements here, but who knows? Let's live in a land of possibility. And maybe it's someone from last year that's no longer affiliated with the school that you loved. Maybe they want to have an opportunity to work with you privately. And obviously some of these are paid help and some of these are volunteer based. And perhaps it's a combination that would really support you. Back to family. I want you to consider the family members, kind of building off of the episode last week where Laura talks about giving people a place to contribute. I want you to consider that your family member pool of people to help doesn't have to be limited to the adults. Cousins or other ages of family members can totally contribute and be part of your team. All right, let's shift in and look at some places to start. So hopefully I've inspired you to be like, okay, yeah, maybe I'm willing to shift this a little bit. Let's look at where to start. So why don't you consider the more specific you are with asking, the easier it will be for people to say yes. So I have some examples and I want you to consider the difference. Even back to my friend who asked for support driving to chemo, she would say, hey, can you give me a ride at 9:00 on Thursday? So I could either say, yes, that works for me, or no, it doesn't. And if I said no, I hope I said, and let me know if you still need something, because it doesn't work for me, but I'm willing to make it work. Okay, there's some other options here. So one option you might, an area of need would be, I need some financial help, right? So you come up with that idea. And that, if you go to an organization or even a family member, they might be like, okay, what does that mean? It might be, I need some help with a mortgage this month. So going to your church community, who I guarantee you has a benevolence fund to help people in need. These are not other people. Sometimes these people are us. Or another example where you might start is, I need a break for my child. Okay, that's a good start. Let's see if we can get more specific. Can I train you so that you can come over to be with my child from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. one day a week? Or one day during this break? You see how specific that is? That if you ask your mother-in-law, let's just say, she's so clear on, okay, yeah, I'm willing to do that. Or maybe she's not, and that's okay. We'll go into that in a little bit. Or maybe to your husband, your idea might be, hey, can you manage the meds? And he might be like, yeah, what the heck does that mean? An alternative would be, can you sort out our child's meds into those little pill containers every week so that we're set and ready to go? See how that's so much clearer even in your own mind. And the reason this is really helpful is because firstly, it requires you to identify your need. And this is a bigger shift than I think we realize. Because when we don't acknowledge our own need, it's kind of like we, by default, expect other people to do it for us. So this requires you to step out of being stuck and not knowing, and it requires you to generate from a completely different place. And so it's actually a big shift, and this is the shift that often happens between step 3 and 4, like I mentioned earlier. Okay, another place to start. Commit to what you are creating, but not how. You might think you know who is going to be on your support team. There's like the obvious people. Oh, I'll ask my mother-in-law or ask my mom, or I'll ask somebody that feels very close to you. And interestingly enough, sometimes those aren't the people. So when you ask, I want you not to get attached to people's answers. This is harder than it sounds. When you make a request, I want you to consider that there's 3 options that people have. People can say yes, they can say no, or they can give you a counter proposal. And I guess there's a 4th response of like a no answer, but we put that in the no category. I want you to consider this like tossing a ball back and forth. You are tossing the ball out there, making a request. And as soon as it leaves your mouth or your fingers on text or email, it's not yours anymore. It's actually theirs to say yes, no, or to counter propose. So I really want you to release it after you make the request. And it's easy to make these answers mean something. So when I say don't get attached to people's responses or answers, it also means don't make this mean anything. You could easily make it mean, oh, nobody wants to help. Or that person doesn't love me and is a jerk. Or you could think this is impossible. I want you to consider that this is like hunting. And you're going to like this because I'm not a hunter. And if you are, you'll know this when I continue on this analogy. You don't go out to the hills or mountain or wherever you hunt and see no deer and then leave saying, well, there's nothing to hunt. You go and do the things that hunters do. They hide and they wait, or they travel. Picture what you think about hunting, right? And it's like you go and find the deer. And sometimes the deer is not where you think it's going to be. You don't stop when you miss the deer. Like if you're bow hunting or rifle hunting, you don't be, well, I missed it. I guess I'm not going to get a deer. No, like you keep going. And so I want you to consider that this game of getting a support team is like hunting. And so back to the first point I had in this part is you think you know how it's going to be, but sometimes we just don't know. So when you get the answer, the response back, your job is to keep hunting, to make more requests, maybe to that same person, maybe to a different person. And you might end up with a wild boar instead of a deer, but you might realize that actually that's what you needed all along. And that's okay. All right. Thank you for bearing with my hunting analogy. The final point that I want to offer you in where to start is starting with identifying 1 or 2 areas and focusing on those. We don't have to do this all at one time. That can get very overwhelming. You might choose medication management. That actually takes more time than I realize. I'm going to choose that. Or you might choose some of the physical therapy or home therapy protocols that you do and ask for more support in that area. This reminded me of way back when my son Levi was pretty fresh out of his first surgery, his first tumor resection. And at the time, we knew he had visual impairment, but we didn't understand the extent of it because he was so little. He could not tell us. The ophthalmologist wanted us to patch one of his eyes to help the other one. And so for 4 hours a day, I put this patch on my child, and it would have been impossible because what I didn't know at the time was that he was completely blind in his eye that wasn't being patched. So basically, I was putting a sticker on my son's eye for 4 hours a day that was rendering him completely blind. And picture this. I had a newborn to a 1-year-old, like he was obviously kept growing. And I had like a 5-year-old that I was getting to and from kindergarten. And so thankfully, my dad offered to hire a family member to come and help for those 4 hours a day because I literally would not have been able to do it. And the gift here was that when we found out that he was indeed fully blind, I had no doubt that we hadn't done everything we could have done if he had had some vision in that eye. And the doctor even said so. He's like, well, you guys have done everything possible. And that obviously didn't take away all of the sting from learning that he was completely blind, but it did help knowing that there was nothing more I could have done. So I wanted to share that example just to get your mind spinning and hopefully inspiring you for areas that you might be able to even say, okay, well, I want to just have time here where I'm mom and not mom and caregiver or mom and therapist. And as I wrap up this episode, I hope I've inspired your mind to start thinking outside of the box, because I know it's like when I hear other people talk myself, they help my mind think of things that just didn't occur to me yet. And so that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to be in community, because we literally are not meant to do this alone. And so I hope that you're listening to this and you're just overflowing with inspiration and ideas and commitment to start building out more support to not do this alone. My guess is that you get the idea that I am a big fan of asking for help and receiving it. So go out there and take action. We'll see you on the next episode. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.